Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepless Scientist, a quiet place in the cosmos where your thoughts can unwind and knowledge becomes a soft lullaby for the night. Tonight's journey will take us into a question that is both vast and strangely intimate. Does the universe itself experience time? Before you settle in and get comfortable, I'd like to gently invite you, only if this kind of quiet exploration brings you joy, to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And when you're ready, you can leave a comment telling me where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always comforting to see how many different moments of the night we share together, each from our own corner of the planet. Now feel free to dim the lights. Maybe let a fan hum softly in the background, or allow the room to grow just a little quieter. And as you do, imagine setting down the busy weight of the day. There's nothing you need to solve here, nothing you need to remember. We're simply going to wander together. Most of us grow up thinking of the universe as a place in time. Time ticks forward, second by second, while galaxies drift silently through space. The universe, we're told, is vast, ancient, and mostly indifferent, an enormous stage on which events happen, while time flows across it like a river. But tonight, we'll gently turn that picture around. What if time is not something the universe sits inside? What if the universe itself is what time looks like, unfolding? What if spacetime, the deep fabric that holds stars, light and gravity, is not just a passive backdrop but an active participant in its own story? Not conscious in the human sense perhaps, but responsive, evolving, and carrying traces of its own past within its structure. We won't rush toward answers. Instead, we'll slow down. We'll follow ideas from modern physics, cosmology, and philosophy, translating them into images you can feel rather than equations you need to understand. Along the way, we'll ask whether concepts like moments, memory, and flow might belong not only to minds like ours, but to the cosmos itself, at least in some subtle, unfamiliar way. And if your thoughts begin to drift as we go, that's perfectly fine. Let them wander. Let them blur at the edges. We'll still be here, quietly unfolding the story. At some point, usually late at night, time begins to feel different. The room grows still, sounds soften, your breathing slows without effort, thoughts stretch out, becoming less urgent, less sharply defined. Minutes no longer arrive in neat orderly lines. Instead, they seem to drift, sometimes slipping by unnoticed, sometimes lingering longer than expected. This is how time feels from the inside, and it's worth beginning here with this gentle, familiar sensation, because the question we're exploring tonight doesn't start with galaxies or equations, it starts with experience. You experience time not as numbers on a clock, but as change, as memory, as anticipation, as the quiet awareness that something has just passed and something else is about to arrive. So here is the quiet question at the heart of everything. If time can be experienced, is it possible that experience is not limited to us alone? When we picture the universe, we usually imagine something very different from ourselves. Vast, cold, mechanical, a collection of particles and forces moving according to unbreakable rules. Time in this picture is just a measurement, a way of labeling when things happen. But physics, especially over the last century, has been gently eroding that simple view. We've learned that time is not the same everywhere, that clocks tick differently depending on motion and gravity, that there is no single, universal now shared across the cosmos. A moment that feels present to you may already belong to the past or the future for something far away. In other words, time is not a rigid background. It's woven into the structure of reality itself, and once that realization settles in, another thought quietly follows. If time is part of the universe's structure, not something separate from it, then asking whether the universe experiences time becomes less absurd than it first sounds. Not in the sense of thoughts or feelings, but in the sense of participation, of being involved in its own unfolding. Consider a story written in a book. The characters inside the story experience events one moment at a time. For them, the past is remembered, the future unknown. But the book itself contains the entire story at once, every chapter, every ending, every turning point. Now imagine asking, does the book experience time? At first the answer seems obvious. Of course not, it's just ink and paper. But the book does contain order, structure, sequence, relationships between earlier and later events, and without that structure, no experience of time, by the characters or the reader, would be possible at all. In a similar way, the universe may not experience time as you do, but it may be the thing that makes any experience of time possible in the first place. Modern physics often describes the universe not as a sequence of moments, but as a four-dimensional structure, space and time together, woven into a single fabric. In this view, past, present and future are not separate realms, but different regions of the same whole. From the outside, nothing is flowing. Everything simply is. And yet, from the inside, from within small localized systems like brains, bodies and beating hearts, time feels unmistakably real. It moves, it carries us forward, it leaves traces behind. This raises a delicate, fascinating tension. On one hand, the universe may be timeless in its deepest description. On the other, time is undeniably present in every lived experience that arises within it. So where does that feeling come from? One possibility is that time is not a fundamental ingredient of reality, but an emergent one. Something that appears when parts of the universe begin to change relative to one another, when there is motion, when there is comparison, when there is memory. Think of music. A single note, held forever, has no rhythm, no sense of before or after, but introduce change, a second note, then a third, and suddenly time appears. Not as an object, but as a relationship between sounds. In the same way, time may emerge wherever the universe becomes complex enough to notice its own changes. From this perspective, asking whether the universe experiences time is not about imagining a cosmic mind watching the stars go by. It's about asking whether the universe, through its structure and evolution, participates in the conditions that make experience possible at all. It's a quieter idea than it first appears, not a claim, not a conclusion, just a door left slightly open. As we continue, we'll explore how physicists came to suspect that time itself might be secondary, how space-time behaves less like a stage and more like a responsive material, and how information, memory and awareness might fit into a universe that is far stranger and far more intimate than we once imagined. For now, it's enough to rest with the question, what if the universe is not merely in time, but is, in some deep and subtle way, becoming time? Let that thought settle, like dust slowly drifting through a beam of evening light. Time rarely announces itself. You don't usually notice it arriving. You notice it only when it has already passed, when the cup is empty, when the song has ended, when the room feels different than it did a few minutes ago. Time reveals itself through change, not through presence. This is why time feels like it flows. When you sit quietly, perhaps listening to this late at night, there is no visible river of time moving through the room. Nothing slides past you, nothing makes a sound, and yet something is clearly happening. Your thoughts soften, your body relaxes. The moment you were in a short while ago has quietly slipped away, replaced by this one. From the inside, time feels like motion. For centuries, humans assumed this feeling reflected the true nature of the universe. We imagine time as a steady current, flowing uniformly everywhere, carrying planets, stars, and people along with it. The universe, in this picture, was a vast landscape through which time moved like wind across a field. But modern physics has gently and almost apologetically told us that this picture is not quite right. Time does not flow the same way everywhere. It does not tick at the same rate for all observers. Near massive objects, time slows. At very high speeds, time stretches. Two identical clocks, separated and later reunited, may no longer agree on how much time has passed. This is not because the clocks malfunctioned. It's because time itself behaved differently for each one. What this tells us is subtle but profound. Time is not a universal conveyor belt. It is local, personal, tied to motion, gravity, and perspective. And once time becomes local, the idea of a single cosmic now begins to dissolve. Imagine trying to synchronize watches across the entire universe. You might align two clocks in the same room with ease, but stretch that task across galaxies, each moving relative to the others, each sitting in different gravitational environments, and the concept of one shared present quietly breaks down. There is no single moment that all of reality agrees upon. Instead, there are countless local moments, each unfolding along its own path. This raises an important question. If time does not flow universally, why does it feel so consistent to us? Why does it feel like something is always moving forward, carrying us from past to future? One answer lies not in the structure of the universe, but in the structure of experience. You experience time because you remember. Memory creates direction. You remember earlier moments, but not future ones. You recall what has happened, not what is about to happen. This asymmetry, this imbalance between remembering and anticipating, creates the feeling of flow. Without memory, there would be no sense of passing time. Everything would be an eternal present. Think of waking up briefly in the middle of the night, disoriented, unsure how long you've been asleep. For a moment, time seems to vanish. There is no clear before or after, only a floating now. It's memory snapping back into place that restores the timeline. On a cosmic scale, something similar may be happening. The universe changes, structures form, stars ignite, galaxies collide. These changes leave traces, patterns, records, and wherever records accumulate, where the past leaves marks that the present can carry forward, time begins to feel directional. This direction is often called the arrow of time, but it is less like an arrow shot forward and more like a trail of footprints left behind. The universe does not push itself into the future. It carries the past with it, step by step. This is why a cooling cup of tea matters so much in physics. A hot cup left alone will slowly cool until it matches the room. It never spontaneously heats itself back up. The warmth spreads, diffuses, becomes harder to distinguish. The world moves from more organized states to more mixed ones. This gradual spreading of energy is what gives time its sense of direction. Not because the universe prefers the future, but because it remembers the past. And memory, in this sense, does not require a mind. It requires structure. It requires the present to be shaped by what came before. From this viewpoint, the flow of time is not something the universe does. It is something that appears when the universe changes in certain ways. Time feels like a river, because we are carried by memory through change. Now, consider what this implies for the universe as a whole. If time's flow emerges from change and change happens everywhere, then time is not a single thread weaving through reality. It is a tapestry of local experiences, each stitched together by relationships. The universe does not sit in time like a clock on a wall. Time arises within it, wherever complexity allows the past to leave traces in the present. This is why physicists sometimes describe the universe as a completed structure, while still acknowledging the reality of lived time. From the outside, everything may simply exist. From the inside, sequences matter, order matters, memory matters. Both perspectives can be true at once, like reading a novel. The story, as a whole, already exists. The beginning and the ending are fixed on the page. But as you read, the story unfolds, tension builds, characters change. Moments matter precisely because you experience them one at a time. The flow of time, then, may be less about the universe moving forward and more about how parts of the universe experience their own unfolding. And that brings us gently back to our guiding question. If the feeling of time emerges from memory, change and structure, and if the universe itself is a vast network of changing structures, carrying traces of its own past, then perhaps the universe does not experience time in the way you do, but it may be the reason experience exists at all. Time may not belong to the universe like a property. The universe may belong to time as a process. And in that quiet shift, from time as a thing to time as a relationship, we begin to see why the cosmos feels less like a machine and more like a story slowly being told. A story that does not rush. A story that does not need an ending to exist. A story that unfolds simply because it can. Let that idea settle gently, like a thought you don't need to finish before sleep arrives. For a long time, the universe was imagined as something solid and unmoving. A vast, silent container. Space stretched out in all directions. Time marched forward in steady steps, and everything that happened did so inside this fixed framework. It was a comforting picture. In this view, the universe itself did not change. Only the things within it did. Stars were born and died. Planets wandered. People came and went. But the stage remained the same, unchanging, indifferent, eternal. And from our everyday perspective, this made perfect sense. When you look up at the night sky, nothing appears to move. Constellations seem frozen. The stars hold their positions night after night, year after year. Even across a human lifetime, the cosmos feels immovable, like a painted ceiling above the world. Stillness feels natural, but this sense of cosmic calm is deeply misleading. The reason is scale. On human timescales, many cosmic changes are simply too slow to notice. Galaxies drift apart at speeds that would take millions of years to reveal themselves. Space itself stretches so gently that no sensation accompanies it. The universe is changing constantly, but so slowly and on such immense scales that to us it feels motionless, like watching the hour hand of a clock. If you stare at it long enough, it seems frozen. Only when you look away and return later do you realize it has moved. The motion was always there. It just unfolded at a pace your senses were never designed to track. Modern physics began to uncover this hidden motion in the early 20th century, when scientists stopped treating space and time as rigid containers and began treating them as physical things that could stretch, bend, and respond. This was a radical shift. Instead of imagining the universe as a stage on which events occur, physicists began to realize that the stage itself is part of the play. Space can expand, time can slow, the geometry of reality can change depending on what it contains. The universe, it turns out, is not still at all. Even the emptiest regions of space are restless. They simmer with subtle activity, with fleeting fluctuations and faint energies that never quite settle into nothingness. On unimaginably small scales, what looks like emptiness behaves more like a gentle, restless foam, constantly forming and dissolving patterns that never fully come to rest. Stillness, then, is not a fundamental feature of reality. It is a perspective, and once we accept that, another idea quietly emerges. If the universe is always changing, even in its emptiest places, then perhaps time is not something laid across it from the outside. Perhaps time is simply how this ongoing change appears when viewed from within. This leads us to a subtle but powerful thought. What if the universe is not in time at all? What if the universe is time unfolding itself? In this view, time is not a background river flowing past galaxies. Time is the name we give to the universe's continuous transformation, its expansion, its cooling, its gradual growth of structure and complexity. The universe does not sit inside a timeline. The timeline is drawn by the universe as it evolves. This idea challenges another deeply rooted assumption, the idea of a universal present moment. We tend to imagine now as something global, as if the entire universe shares the same instant. But physics tells us this is not the case. Different regions of the cosmos, moving differently and shaped by different gravitational influences, do not agree on what now means. There is no single cosmic heartbeat ticking away in unison. Instead, there are countless local rhythms, each tied to its own conditions. A clock near a massive star ticks more slowly than one far away. A clock on a fast-moving spacecraft ticks differently than one resting quietly. None of these clocks are wrong. They are simply experiencing time along different paths through the universe. This makes the idea of a frozen, universal present impossible. And yet, from our limited perspective, stillness persists. We live in a tiny corner of the cosmos, moving slowly compared to cosmic speeds, far from extreme gravitational environments. Our clocks stay in sync. Our days feel regular. Our nights arrive on schedule. Within this narrow window, time feels smooth and reliable. But zoom out far enough and that smoothness dissolves. The universe becomes a patchwork of unfolding moments, each local, each valid, none privileged above the others. In this light, cosmic stillness begins to look like a convenient illusion, a byproduct of our position and scale. It is not that the universe is calm, it is that we are small. And when small observers look at something unimaginably large, motion becomes difficult to perceive. This shift in perspective has deep consequences for how we think about time and awareness. If there is no single present moment, then the universe cannot be said to exist now in the way we do. It exists as a vast structure containing many different nows, each belonging to different observers, different paths, different regions of space-time. The universe does not pause for a moment. It does not wait. It does not hold still. It simply is, in a continual state of becoming. And perhaps this is why time feels so intimate to us. We are not standing outside the universe, watching it unfold. We are part of the unfolding itself. Our sense of time is shaped by the same processes that shape stars, galaxies, and the slow expansion of space. The stillness we imagine is a projection, a human simplification layered onto a reality that is far more fluid. Once that simplification falls away, the universe begins to feel less like a machine and more like a living process. Not alive in the biological sense, but active, responsive, never frozen. And in such a universe, the question of time changes its tone. It is no longer about when things happen. It is about how change happens at all. As we drift further into this idea, we'll begin to explore a view of reality where past, present, and future coexist, not as moments passing, but as parts of a single, intricate structure. For now, it's enough to let go of the image of a still cosmos. The universe is moving, even when it seems quiet, changing, even when it looks calm, unfolding, even when we cannot feel the motion. And somewhere within that unfolding, our own sense of time quietly takes shape. There is a simple question that feels almost too obvious to ask. What time is it right now? You might glance at a clock. Or perhaps you already know, in that loose intuitive way that comes from living inside a familiar rhythm of days and nights. Morning feels different from evening. Late night has its own texture. Now feels real, immediate, shared. It feels as though the entire world is standing with you in the same moment. But this feeling, as natural as it is, turns out to be deeply local. Physics gently suggests that now is not something the universe agrees upon. It is something each observer carries with them, shaped by motion, gravity, and position. To understand this, imagine two friends who synchronize their watches and then part ways. One remains on Earth, the other boards a spacecraft and travels at an enormous speed, circling the planet before returning home. When they reunite and compare their watches, something strange has happened. The traveller's clock has fallen behind. Less time has passed for them. No trick, no malfunction. Time itself unfolded differently along each journey. This tells us something quietly astonishing. Time is not a single river flowing evenly everywhere. It is more like a landscape, with slopes and curves, where each path has its own rhythm. Moving quickly or passing near massive objects subtly reshapes how time is experienced. And once time behaves differently depending on where you are and how you move, the idea of a single, universal present begins to unravel. If two observers cannot agree on how much time has passed, how could they possibly agree on what moment is happening right now? Extend this idea outward, beyond Earth, beyond our solar system, beyond our galaxy. Different regions of the universe are moving relative to one another. Some are rushing away as space expands. Others are bound together by gravity. Some lie near dense clusters of galaxies. Others float in vast, quiet voids. Each of these regions carries its own sense of time. There is no cosmic bell that rings to announce a shared present moment. No master clock ticking away in the center of everything. Instead, now becomes something personal, local, tied to the path you take through the universe. This can feel unsettling at first. We like the idea that reality has a single, well-defined present. It reassures us that events are ordered, that the world unfolds in a clean, synchronized way. But nature seems comfortable with a messier arrangement. Reality does not pause for a global snapshot. It allows countless presents to coexist. From this perspective, the universe looks less like a sequence of moments, and more like a vast structure containing many different slices of time, all equally real. Some events that feel like the future to you may already belong to the past for something far away. Other events you consider long finished may still be unfolding elsewhere. This is not because anyone is mistaken. It is because time itself is woven into the geometry of reality. Imagine a long, winding mountain trail. Two hikers start at different elevations and follow different paths. At certain points, one may look down and see the other below. Still approaching a bend the first has already passed. From one perspective, that bend lies in the future. From another, it lies in the past. Neither view is privileged. Both are correct within their own frame. The universe works much the same way. Events are not ordered by a single universal timeline. They are ordered by relationships, by how one path through space and time connects to another. This realization quietly dissolves the idea of a cosmic present moment in which the entire universe resides. There is no single frame of reference that can claim to be the one true now, and yet, here you are, experiencing a very real sense of presence. This brings us to a subtle but important distinction. The absence of a universal now does not mean that the present is an illusion. It means that the present is local. It belongs to observers embedded in the universe, not to the universe as a whole. Your present moment is real because your memories, perceptions, and surroundings align in a particular way. It is stitched together by your brain, your body, and your immediate environment. The universe does not share this stitching. From the universe's perspective, if such a thing can even be meaningfully said, there is no preferred slice of time singled out as special. All moments exist within the larger structure. This idea often leads to what is called the block universe view, where past, present, and future are all part of one extended whole, not flowing, not appearing and disappearing, simply there. But even within this picture, experience still matters. A book contains every page at once, but reading still happens one page at a time. The existence of the entire story does not erase the experience of moving through it. Likewise, the universe may contain all moments, but conscious experience still unfolds locally, creating the feeling of passage. The universe does not need a present moment to exist. We do, and that difference is revealing. It suggests that time, as we feel it, is not a fundamental feature stamped onto reality. It is something that arises wherever systems are complex enough to carry memories forward, compare states, and register change. The universe may not experience a now, but it gives rise to countless local nows within itself. Each one brief, each one valid, each one quietly connected to a larger timeless structure. As you rest with this idea, notice how gentle it is. It does not erase meaning, it doesn't flatten experience, it simply removes the burden of imagining a single cosmic moment that everything must share. Reality becomes more spacious, more forgiving. Time is no longer a strict ruler laid across the universe. It is a patchwork of lived moments, each unfolding along its own path. And somewhere within that patchwork, your present moment exists, soft, fleeting, and entirely sufficient. As we continue drifting through these ideas, we'll begin to explore what it means for time to exist without a universal now, and how this opens the door to viewing the universe not as a sequence of moments, but as a single, intricate whole. For now, let the idea of now loosen its grip. You're exactly where you need to be in time, and the universe is under no obligation to agree. There is a way of thinking about the universe that feels both calming and unsettling at the same time. It suggests that nothing is truly rushing forward, nothing is disappearing, nothing is waiting to arrive. Instead, everything simply exists. This idea often emerges when physicists follow the implications of relativity all the way to their quiet conclusion. If there is no universal now, if time depends on motion and perspective, then it becomes difficult to defend the idea that the present moment is objectively special. And from that difficulty, a different picture slowly takes shape. In this picture, the universe is not something that happens moment by moment. It is something that exists as a whole. Past, present, and future are not separate realms, but different regions of a single four-dimensional structure. This is sometimes called the block universe. The name sounds heavy, even rigid, but the idea itself is surprisingly gentle. Imagine a long novel resting on a table. Every chapter is already there. The opening pages, the middle twists, the final lines. Nothing is missing. Nothing is being created as you read. And yet, when you open the book and begin, the story unfolds one page at a time. You experience suspense. You remember what has already happened. You wonder what comes next. The existence of the entire story does not erase the experience of reading it. In the same way, the block universe does not deny your experience of time. It simply places that experience inside a larger structure. From the universe's perspective, if we can speak that way, all moments exist together. From your perspective, those moments are encountered in sequence. Both views can coexist without contradiction. This helps explain something that has puzzled people for a long time. If the laws of physics do not seem to care about past or future, if they work just as well running forward as backward, then why does time feel so directional to us? Why do we feel as though we're moving through time rather than standing still within it? The block universe offers a quiet answer. We're not moving through time, we're tracing a path within it. Your life is not a point sliding along a timeline. It is a continuous thread woven through the fabric of space-time. Along that thread, memories accumulate in one direction. Experiences line up in a particular order. Causes precede effects. This ordering gives rise to the feeling of flow. But the flow is not something the universe imposes. It is something your path reveals. This can feel strange, even uncomfortable, because it challenges a deeply human intuition. We tend to believe that the future is open and the past is fixed, that tomorrow is waiting to be created while yesterday is locked away forever. The block universe gently loosens that grip. In this view, the future already exists, not as something decided in advance, but as part of the structure that includes all possible events. Your choices are not erased by this picture. They are simply embedded within it. Think again of the novel. The characters' decisions are already written, but they still matter. They still shape the story. They are still the reason the ending is what it is. The fact that the book exists does not make the characters meaningless. Likewise, the existence of future moments does not drain meaning from present ones. If anything, it deepens it. Every moment becomes a permanent feature of the universe. Nothing is lost. Nothing truly vanishes. Each experience you have is etched into the structure of reality, not swept away by a passing river of time. This is why some people find the block universe comforting. There is no rushing toward oblivion, no frantic chase to keep up with time as it escapes. Every moment you live remains part of the universe forever, in the same quiet way that every page of a book remains part of the story. Of course, this picture raises difficult questions. If the future already exists, what does that say about freedom, about choice, about change? The block universe does not answer these questions outright. Instead, it reframes them. Change does not disappear. It becomes relational. Events change relative to one another along different paths. Choices still occur. Decisions still shape outcomes. They are simply not created out of nothing at the edge of time. They are part of the structure itself. From within the story, uncertainty remains real. You do not know what will happen next. You still deliberate. You still hope. You still act. The block universe does not grant you knowledge of the ending. It only suggests that the ending exists somewhere in the vast architecture of space-time. And importantly, this view does not imply that the universe is static or dead. A painting can be still and lifeless. A symphony written on paper can be complete and vibrant. Completeness does not equal stagnation. The universe in this picture is not frozen. It is rich, layered, full of structure and relationship. The sense of motion arises because conscious systems like us encounter that structure in a particular way, one slice at a time. This brings us gently back to our central question. If the universe exists as a whole, containing all moments, does it experience time? Perhaps not as a flow, perhaps not as a sequence, but perhaps as structure. The universe may not feel the passing of moments, but it contains the conditions that make feeling possible. It holds every moment in relationship to every other, creating a vast silent order that supports experience without needing to have experience itself. In this sense, the universe does not watch time go by. It is the arrangement of time. And within that arrangement, local pockets of awareness arise, systems that remember, anticipate, and feel the difference between what has been and what might come next. As you rest with this idea, notice how it softens urgency. There is nothing chasing you, nothing you must outrun, nothing slipping irretrievably. Away, every moment has its place, and as we continue, we'll begin to explore how this timeless structure still gives rise to the very strong feeling that time moves forward. Why, even in a block universe, the arrow of time remains such a powerful presence in our lives. For now, let the image of the universe as a completed story settle gently, not finished, not closed, simply whole. There's a moment in every long journey where the path grows quieter, not darker, not more difficult, just quieter. Fewer landmarks, fewer familiar signs, the kind of silence that asks you to slow down and listen more carefully. This is where our exploration arrives now. Up to this point, we've been talking about time as something flexible but still present, local rather than universal, experienced rather than absolute, woven into structure rather than flowing like a river. But when physicists began asking the deepest possible questions about the universe, questions about its origin, its total structure, its most fundamental description, something unexpected happened. Time began to fade. In some of the most ambitious attempts to describe the universe as a whole, time does not appear as a basic ingredient at all, not hidden, not distorted, simply absent. This is not because physicists decided time was unimportant. Quite the opposite. It vanished because the equations describing the universe became so fundamental that there was nothing left for time to compare itself against. To understand this, imagine trying to describe the motion of a single object in an otherwise empty universe. Motion only makes sense relative to something else. Without reference points, without change relative to other things, the idea of motion loses meaning. The same is true for time. Time measures change. If there is nothing outside the universe to change relative to, then time as an external parameter quietly slips away. In certain descriptions of the universe, everything that exists is already included. There is no outside clock ticking along, no external observer watching events unfold. The universe, taken as a complete whole, has nothing to measure itself against, and so, in these descriptions, time disappears. This does not mean the universe is frozen. It means that change is described differently. Instead of asking, what happens next? These models ask, how are different parts of the universe related to one another? Change becomes a matter of comparison, not progression. Think of a photograph album laid open on a table. All the photos exist at once. Childhood, adolescence, adulthood, all present together. There is no built-in arrow pointing from one page to the next. And yet, the photos clearly represent change, growth, difference, transformation. The change is real, but time is not doing the work. Relationship is. This idea can feel deeply counterintuitive because our minds are trained to expect time everywhere. We use it to organize our thoughts, our plans, our sense of identity. Removing it feels like removing the ground beneath our feet, but physics is not obligated to match our intuition. When researchers attempt to merge our understanding of gravity with the strange rules of the quantum world, time often refuses to cooperate. It does not behave like space. It cannot always be sliced neatly into moments. It resists being treated as a simple parameter, and so, in the quiet heart of these theories, the universe is described as a collection of possible configurations, different ways reality could be arranged, without any one of them being labelled as earlier or later by an external clock. This does not mean that nothing happens. It means that happening is not fundamental. Change exists, but sequence is something we impose. This brings us to an important shift in perspective. Instead of asking how the universe moves through time, we begin asking how time emerges from the universe. If the deepest description of reality is timeless, then time must arise somewhere else. Not from the foundation, but from the patterns built on top of it. And those patterns appear when parts of the universe become complex enough to act as clocks for one another. A heartbeat measures time for the body. The orbit of a planet measures time for a year. The oscillation of atoms measures time for a second. None of these clocks exist in isolation. They work because they compare one regular process to another. Time, in this sense, is a relationship. When one process changes in a steady way relative to another, time appears. From this viewpoint, time is not a substance flowing through the universe. It is a bookkeeping tool that emerges wherever there is regularity and comparison. This is why, even if the universe as a whole can be described without time, smaller parts of it, like stars, planets, and living beings, still experience time very vividly. They are systems embedded within a larger structure, comparing their internal changes to external ones, building histories, storing memories. Time arises locally, even if it disappears globally. This idea gently reframes our earlier discussions. The absence of a universal now, the block universe, the local nature of temporal experience. All of these fit naturally into a picture where time is not fundamental, but emergent. And this has a subtle implication for our central question. If time is not fundamental, then asking whether the universe experiences time becomes more nuanced. The universe as a whole may not experience succession or flow. It may simply exist as a complete structure, rich with relationships but lacking a global sense of before and after. Yet within that structure, countless local experiences arise, each carrying its own sense of time, each tracing its own path through change. The universe does not need to feel time for time to be real. Time can be something the universe gives rise to, without possessing it itself, like silence giving rise to music. The silence does not sing, but without it no song could ever be heard. As you sit with this idea, notice how it changes the emotional texture of time. Time no longer feels like something imposed from above, something pushing everything forward whether it wants to or not. It feels more like a pattern that appears wherever the universe becomes rich enough to notice itself changing. And perhaps this is why time feels so intimate to us. We're not just observers of time, we're places where time happens. Our memories, our expectations, our awareness. All of these are ways the universe locally escapes its own timelessness, just for a while. In the next stretch of our journey, we'll explore how this emergent view of time connects to one of the most powerful ideas in physics, the arrow of time, and why the universe seems to remember its past even if it has no global clock. For now, let yourself rest in the quiet strangeness of a universe where time is not written into the foundation, but gently grows wherever complexity allows it. A universe that does not rush, a universe that does not count seconds, a universe that simply is, and through you, occasionally feels what it's like to change. If time is not written into the deepest description of the universe, then it must appear somewhere else, not suddenly, not dramatically, but quietly, the way patterns form when enough pieces fall into place. To find where time comes from, we don't need to look outward toward the edge of the cosmos. We can look inward, toward the simple idea of comparison. Imagine sitting in a room with no windows and no clocks, If nothing changes, no sounds, no movement, no shift in light, then time becomes almost impossible to sense. Minutes lose their meaning, duration dissolves, there is only an extended present. Now imagine a single sound repeating at regular intervals, a drip of water, a ticking mechanism, a slow, steady pulse. Suddenly time returns. Nothing about the room itself has changed. What has changed is the presence of a reliable comparison. One event marks itself against another. Difference becomes measurable, and from that measurement, time emerges. This is the quiet secret at the heart of temporal experience. Time is not something added to the universe. It is something that appears when change becomes structured. In physics, this idea shows up again and again. Wherever there are regular processes, oscillations, rotations, cycles, there are clocks. And wherever there are clocks, time becomes meaningful. A planet orbiting a star creates a year. A spinning planet creates a day. A vibrating atom creates a second. None of these processes contain time. They simply repeat in a way that allows other processes to be compared against them. Time is born from relationships. This relational view helps explain why time can disappear at the deepest level of description and yet feel overwhelmingly real in everyday life. The universe, taken as a whole, may lack an external reference point, but inside the universe, countless systems act as references for one another. Stars burn at predictable rates. Atoms vibrate with remarkable regularity. Living organisms maintain rhythms, heartbeats, breaths, sleep cycles. Each of these rhythms becomes a way of keeping track of change. When one rhythm speeds up or slows down relative to another, time reveals its flexibility. This is why motion and gravity affect time. They alter the relationship between processes. Time is not stretched like rubber. The relationships between changes are. This idea gently reframes something we often take for granted. We usually imagine clocks as measuring time, but from this perspective, clocks do not measure time, they create it. Or more precisely, they reveal it by establishing stable patterns of change. Without clocks, there would still be change, but there would be no way to organize that change into before and after, shorter and longer. This is why time feels inseparable from memory. Memory is a kind of internal clock. It compares what is happening now with what happened before. It preserves differences. It builds sequence. Without memory, experience collapses into a continuous present. With memory, moments line up into a story. And that applies not only to minds, but to matter itself. A cooled stone carries the memory of heat lost. A fossil carries the memory of ancient life. Light travelling through space carries the memory of distant stars. These are not memories in the human sense, but they are records. Traces, imprints left by past interactions. Wherever records accumulate, time gains direction. This is why the universe feels as though it has a past, because the present is shaped by what came before, because change leaves marks that do not fully erase themselves. In this way, time grows out of asymmetry, out of imbalance, out of the simple fact that some changes are easier to undo than others. It is easy to scatter dust across a table. It is hard to gather it back into the exact shape it once formed. That difference is what gives time its sense of direction. And yet, even here, time is not something imposed from outside. It is a pattern that arises because the universe began in a state where change could leave lasting traces. Once again, time appears not as a fundamental ingredient, but as a consequence. This has an important implication for our larger question. If time is born wherever change becomes comparable and records accumulate, then time does not belong exclusively to conscious beings. It belongs to any system capable of sustaining structure long enough to remember its own previous states. The universe does not need to experience time globally for time to exist locally. Time blooms wherever there is enough order to notice disorder growing. From this perspective, the cosmos begins to look less like a machine operating according to an external schedule, and more like a vast network of processes quietly keeping time with one another, not synchronized, not unified, but connected. Each region carries its own rhythms, each structure unfolds at its own pace, and together these countless local tempos create the rich, layered experience we call time. You, listening right now, are one such rhythm. Your breathing marks moments. Your thoughts create sequence. Your awareness compares what is happening now to what happened just before. Time is happening here, because comparison is happening here. And this is why time feels so immediate, so intimate. It is not something you observe from a distance. It is something you participate in simply by changing and remembering. The universe, in its vastness, may not possess a single clock or a unified sense of duration, but it is filled with countless small clocks, each marking change in its own quiet way. And wherever those clocks exist, time appears. As we move forward, we'll explore how this emergence of time connects to one of the most familiar and mysterious features of reality, the arrow of time, and why, despite all this flexibility, time still seems to move inexorably in one direction. For now, let the idea rest gently. Time is not a river carrying the universe along. It is a pattern the universe traces whenever change becomes meaningful. And in that tracing, we find ourselves keeping time simply by being here, changing, and remembering. There is something about time that feels stubborn. No matter how flexible it becomes in theory, no matter how gently we loosen our grip on clocks and calendars, time still seems to insist on one thing above all else. It points forward. You can remember yesterday, but not tomorrow. You can spill a glass of water and watch it spread across the table, but you never see it gather itself back into the glass. You can age, but you cannot grow younger. This persistent direction is known as the arrow of time, and it is one of the quietest, most powerful features of the universe. What makes the arrow of time so intriguing is that, at a deep level, the basic rules governing matter do not seem to care which way time points. Many of the fundamental laws of physics work just as well if you imagine them running backward. Motions can be reversed, interactions can be retraced, and yet the world you live in does not behave that way. There is a mismatch between the timeless elegance of the laws and the irreversible texture of experience. To understand why, we need to look not at motion itself, but at organization. Imagine a deck of cards laid out in perfect order, sorted carefully by suit and number. Now imagine shuffling that deck. The cards scatter into countless possible arrangements. It is easy to go from order to disorder. It is extraordinarily unlikely to go back the other way by chance. This simple asymmetry lies at the heart of the arrow of time. The universe has many more ways to be disordered than ordered. As things change, they tend to drift towards states that are more mixed, more spread out, more evenly shared. This drift does not require intention. It is a matter of probability. A warm room cools because energy spreads. A drop of ink disperses because mixing has more possible arrangements than separation. Footprints fade because disorder has more room to grow than order has to maintain itself. The arrow of time is not a force pushing the universe forward. It is a tendency, a quiet statistical bias woven into the fabric of change. But this raises an even deeper question. If disorder is so likely, why did the universe ever begin in an ordered state at all? Why was there something to run down, something to mix, something to forget? The early universe, as far as we can tell, was remarkably smooth and uniform. Energy was distributed evenly. Structures had not yet formed. Paradoxically, this simple state was also one of very low disorder in terms of how gravity behaves. This low disorder beginning provided room for the arrow of time to emerge. As the universe expanded and cooled, small differences grew, matter clumped, stars formed, galaxies assembled, complexity blossomed. Each of these processes left records behind, fossils of structure, patterns shaped by what came before, and once records exist, time gains direction. The past becomes the set of states that left traces. The future becomes the set of states that have not yet done so. From this perspective, the arrow of time is not something the universe chooses. It is something the universe inherits from its beginning, and importantly, this arrow does not require consciousness. A stone rolling downhill does not know it is obeying time's arrow. A melting ice cube does not feel the loss of structure. The arrow operates silently, shaping change without awareness, and yet awareness amplifies it. Living systems depend on the arrow of time. Memory works because the past leaves reliable marks. Learning works because changes persist. Life itself feeds on gradients, differences that have not yet evened out. Your body maintains order by exporting disorder to its surroundings. You stay organized by gently increasing disorder elsewhere. In doing so, you align yourself with the arrow of time. This is why time feels so strongly directional to us. We are built to ride the arrow. Our memories point backward because the world leaves traces in one direction. Our expectations point forward because the future has not yet left its marks. And this is where the arrow of time connects back to our central question about the universe. If the universe has an arrow, does that mean it knows which way it is going? Not in the sense of intention or awareness, but in the sense of structure, yes. The universe's present state contains information about its past. It does not contain the same kind of information about its future. This asymmetry is real. It is physical. It is measurable. The universe carries its history forward with it embedded in patterns of matter, energy, and structure. In that limited but meaningful sense, the universe remembers, not as a mind remembers, but as a landscape remembers the path of a river, as a canyon remembers the flow of water that carved it, as the rings of a tree remember years of growth. Memory here is not experience, it is persistence, and wherever persistence exists, time gains direction. This gives the arrow of time a quiet dignity. It is not a mysterious force, it is not a cosmic decision. It is a natural consequence of how change unfolds in a universe that began in a special state. The arrow points forward because it cannot point anywhere else, and yet, from within this forward-pointing universe, experience blooms. Consciousness arises, awareness tracks change, meaning accumulates. The universe does not need to experience the arrow of time for the arrow to shape everything within it. It is enough that the arrow exists. As we continue, we'll begin to explore how this arrow interacts with the fabric of space-time itself, how space and time respond to energy and motion, and how the universe behaves less like a rigid stage and more like an active participant in its own unfolding. For now, rest with the image of time not as a rushing river, but as a gentle slope, one that everything naturally rolls along quietly, without resistance. The arrow of time does not hurry you, it simply gives direction to change, and in following that direction, the universe slowly tells its story, one irreversible moment at a time. There was a time when gravity seemed simple. You dropped an object and it fell. The earth pulled it downward, as if reaching out with an invisible hand. For centuries this idea worked beautifully. It explained falling apples, orbiting moons, and the steady rhythm of the planets. Gravity was treated as a force, one thing pulling on another across empty space. But beneath that familiar picture, something quieter was waiting. At the beginning of the 20th century, a young physicist began to question the idea that gravity was a force at all. He noticed that falling feels very much like floating, and floating feels very much like falling. An astronaut drifting through space feels weightless, but so does someone in free fall, if only for a brief moment. This small observation opened a very large door. What if gravity was not a pull, but a consequence of how space and time themselves are shaped? In this new view, space and time are not rigid containers. They are flexible, responsive. They change shape depending on what they contain. Mass and energy do not tug on objects from afar. Instead, they gently reshape the fabric of space-time, guiding motion from within. Imagine laying a soft cloth across a table. If you place a heavy object in the center, the cloth dips. Roll a marble nearby, and it curves inward. Not because the object reaches out to grab it, but because the surface itself has changed shape. The marble is simply following the contours of the cloth. This image is only a picture, not the full reality. Space-time is not literally a fabric, and nothing is sinking into it. But the metaphor captures something essential. Objects move the way they do, because space-time tells them how to move. Gravity, in this sense, is geometry. This idea transformed our understanding of the universe. Planets orbit stars not because they are pulled, but because they are following the natural curves of space-time. Light bends near massive objects not because it has weight, but because the space it travels through is curved. Space and time respond. They are not passive. They do not remain silent when mass and energy are present. They react, adjusting their shape, altering paths, shaping motion. And once we accept that space-time can bend, stretch, and respond, it begins to feel less like an empty stage and more like a participant. The universe is no longer a backdrop for events. It is involved in those events. This shift carries a subtle emotional weight. A static universe feels distant and indifferent. A responsive universe feels closer, more intimate, not conscious, not intentional, but active, engaged in its own unfolding. As stars form, space-time curves. As galaxies collide, space-time ripples. As matter moves, space-time adjusts. Nothing happens on top of space-time. Everything happens within it, and space-time changes as a result. This idea also reshapes how we think about time. If time is part of space-time and space-time is dynamic, then time itself is not fixed. It stretches and compresses along with space. Near massive objects, time slows. In calmer regions, it flows more freely. Each path through the universe carries its own rhythm. Time becomes something shaped, not something imposed. This is a profound departure from older views. Time is no longer a universal metronome ticking away in the background. It is woven into the very structure of reality, responding to what the universe contains. In this light, asking whether the universe experiences time takes on a new meaning. The universe does not sit inside a pre-existing timeline. The timeline emerges from the universe's structure, from how space-time bends, stretches, and evolves. Time is not added to space-time. Time is part of space-time, and space-time we now see behaves like something physical. It can ripple, it can stretch, it can respond. When massive objects move suddenly, they send gentle waves through space-time, subtle vibrations that travel outward, carrying information about distant events. These ripples are incredibly faint by the time they reach us, but they are real. They are the universe's geometry reacting to change. The universe does not merely allow events to happen, it reacts to them. This responsiveness is not awareness, but it is participation, and participation is enough to blur the line between stage and actor. A violin does not hear the music it produces, but it vibrates. It responds. It shapes the sound. Without it, the music would not exist in the same way. Space-time plays a similar role. It does not think. It does not remember. But it responds in ways that shape everything that follows. Once we see space-time as responsive, a quiet continuity emerges between many ideas we've already explored. The absence of a universal now. The emergence of time from relationships. The arrow of time shaped by structure and change. All of these fit naturally into a universe where space-time itself is dynamic. Time does not flow through space-time like water through a pipe. It emerges from the way space-time changes and the way matter moves within it. In such a universe, the question is no longer whether space-time is alive in any biological sense. It is whether the universe is as inert as we once believed. And the answer, gently, is no. The universe responds to itself. It curves under its own contents. It ripples when disturbed. It evolves as matter and energy rearrange. This does not make the universe conscious, but it does make it active in a deeper way than a static backdrop ever could. As we move forward, we'll explore how this responsive space-time behaves even more like a physical system, one that carries balance, boundaries, and traces of information. We'll begin to see how the geometry of the universe and the flow of time are intertwined with ideas of heat, order, and memory. For now, let this image settle. Not a universe standing still, waiting for things to happen, but a universe that bends, adjusts, and participates, quietly shaping its own story as it unfolds. Once you begin to see space-time as something that can bend and respond, it becomes difficult to think of it as empty ever again. What once looked like a silent background now feels more like a presence, quiet but involved. And as physicists continue to explore this idea, they notice something even more surprising. Space-time does not just respond geometrically. In certain situations, it behaves as if it has physical qualities we usually associate with matter itself. This is where the story becomes especially subtle and especially gentle if we allow it to be. Think about warmth. When you place your hands near a fire, you don't see heat. You feel it. Warmth is not a substance you can point to. It is a way energy spreads, a measure of how lively motion becomes at small scales. Heat is about balance slowly being restored. Now imagine discovering that empty space, under the right conditions, also carries something like warmth. Not metaphorical warmth, but a physical tendency to balance, to respond, to settle. This idea emerged when physicists began paying close attention to boundaries, places where regions of space-time meet limits. Not walls you can touch, but natural edges created by motion, gravity, and light itself. There are situations where parts of the universe become hidden from one another, where signals cannot cross back, where information passes a point of no return. At these boundaries, space-time begins to behave in an unexpected way. It acts as though it has a temperature. This does not mean space is hot in the way a stove is hot. There's no glowing surface, no warmth you could feel. Instead, it means that space-time, at these edges, shows the same kind of statistical behavior that physical systems show when they exchange energy. It behaves as though it is keeping track. These boundaries also seem to carry something like balance. When energy flows across them, space-time reacts in a way that resembles how matter responds when it is heated or cooled. There is a relationship between energy, change, and geometry that feels deeply physical. Once again, this does not mean space-time is conscious, but it does mean space-time is not inert. It responds in ways that mirror the behavior of physical systems. This realization quietly transforms how we think about the universe. If spacetime can respond to energy the way matter does, then the line between what happens and where it happens begins to blur. The stage is no longer separate from the play. The setting reacts to the story. The universe becomes self-interacting. As matter moves and rearranges itself, spacetime adjusts. As spacetime adjusts, it shapes how matter can move next. Cause and effect loop gently through geometry. This looping is not a thought process, it is not intention, it is feedback. The universe responds to itself simply because it must. This is why some physicists describe spacetime as having balance. When disturbed, it seeks a new configuration that fits what it contains, not by deciding, but by following deep relationships between structure and change. Imagine a stretched drum skin. Strike it lightly, and ripples spread outward. The drum does not choose how to vibrate. It responds according to its tension, its shape, and the energy it receives. The sound you hear is not separate from the drum. It is the drum's response. Spacetime behaves in a similar way. When energy passes through it, spacetime adjusts its shape. When large changes occur, it vibrates subtly. When boundaries form, it carries traces of what has crossed them. This idea, that spacetime carries information, is one of the most intriguing developments in modern physics. Information here does not mean knowledge or awareness, it means structure. It means the present configuration reflects past interactions. Just as footprints in sand record the passage of feet, spacetime can record the passage of energy and matter in its geometry. These records are not stored in a memory bank. They are woven into the shape of reality itself. This perspective gives new meaning to the idea that the universe remembers. Not as a mind remembers, but as a surface remembers pressure, as a scar remembers a wound, as a landscape remembers erosion. The universe carries its history forward, not by recalling it, but by embodying it, and this embodiment is deeply tied to balance. When energy spreads, spacetime adjusts. When matter clumps, spacetime curves. When systems settle, spacetime reflects that settling. This interplay gives time its texture. Time does not merely tick, it responds. Near strong gravitational environments, time stretches. In calmer regions, it moves more freely. The pace of time reflects the state of space-time itself. Time becomes a feature of geometry. This is a profound shift from the idea of time as a neutral backdrop. It suggests that time participates in the universe's ongoing effort to balance change. In this light, the universe does not experience time in the way a mind does, but it does embody time through its structure. The universe's present state reflects how it arrived here. Its geometry carries the imprint of what has happened. Its future possibilities are shaped by this ongoing response. Once again, awareness is not required. A river does not remember the mountain that shaped it, but its course reveals that history. Space-time does not reflect on its past, but its curvature reveals it. This is why describing space-time as a physical participant is not poetic exaggeration. It is a careful acknowledgement of responsiveness. The universe is not watching itself unfold, it is unfolding through itself. As we continue, we'll explore an even deeper idea, that the very connectivity of space-time may arise from hidden relationships beneath the surface, linking distant regions in ways that defy ordinary intuition. For now, let the image rest. A universe that responds, a universe that balances, a universe whose very shape carries the story of everything that has ever passed through it. There is a quiet idea in modern physics that feels almost poetic. It suggests that the universe may not be stitched together by space and time alone, but by relationships that run deeper, connections so subtle that they do not weaken with distance, and so fundamental that space itself may grow out of them. To approach this idea, it helps to begin with something familiar. Think of two people who have known each other for a long time. They sit across the room, saying nothing, yet a glance is enough to convey understanding. The connection between them does not travel through the air like a sound. It is not sent or received. It simply exists, built from shared history. Now imagine a similar kind of connection, but woven into the fabric of reality itself. In the microscopic world, there are situations where parts of a system behave as though they are deeply linked. No matter how far apart they appear, change one part and the other reflects that change instantly, not by sending a signal, but because they are not fully separate to begin with. This phenomenon is often described as entanglement, but the word itself can feel heavy and technical. It can suggest knots and puzzles, things to be solved rather than felt. A gentler way to think of it is shared structure. Two parts of the universe can be described by a single unified pattern. Even when separated by great distances, they remain expressions of the same underlying state. What happens to one is not communicated to the other. It is already part of a whole. This idea challenges our everyday sense of separateness. We're used to thinking that things interact only by touching or by exchanging signals that travel through space. But entanglement suggests that, at a deep level, space is not the first thing that connects reality. Connection comes first. Space may come later. As physicists explored this idea further, they began to notice something remarkable. In certain theoretical models, the geometry of space, the distances between points, the way regions are connected, appears to depend on how strongly different parts of the universe are linked at this deeper level. When connections are strong, space appears smooth and continuous. When connections weaken, space begins to fray. In extreme cases, regions of space can effectively drift apart, not because they move away, but because the relationships that once bound them fade. This leads to a striking possibility. Space-time itself may not be fundamental. It may be an emergent pattern, arising from deeper connections. Imagine a piece of fabric woven from countless threads. From a distance, you see a smooth surface. You can talk about length, area, and shape, but up close, the surface dissolves into interlaced strands. The geometry you perceived was never separate from the weaving that created it. In this metaphor, entanglement is the weaving. Space-time is the fabric that appears. The universe may not begin with space and time and then fill them with matter. It may begin with relationships, patterns of connection, and allow space and time to emerge as a way of organizing those patterns. This idea quietly transforms how we think about distance. Distance is no longer just how far apart things are. It is how weakly or strongly they are connected. Two regions may appear far apart in space, yet remain deeply linked at a fundamental level. Others may appear close, yet be only loosely related. Space becomes a map of connection, and time, once again, follows. If space-time arises from deeper relationships, then time is not a universal flow, but a feature of how those relationships change. As connections shift, strengthen, or weaken, the geometry of space-time adjusts. Time reflects this adjustment. This perspective fits naturally with everything we have already explored. The absence of a universal now, the block universe as a complete structure, time emerging from comparison and change, space-time behaving like a responsive system. All of these ideas point toward a universe that is less like a machine and more like a network. Not a network of computers or wires, but a network of relationships, each one quietly shaping the whole. This does not mean the universe is thinking or deciding. It means that Structure comes before story, connection before location. The universe does not need to know itself for its parts to be linked. And yet, there is something deeply resonant about this picture. A universe built from connection feels less empty, less cold, less indifferent. It suggests that separation is not as fundamental as it appears. Even vast cosmic distances may be secondary to deeper bonds. From this view, the fabric of reality is not held together by glue or force, but by coherence, by patterns that make the whole more than the sum of its parts. And in such a universe, the emergence of complexity, and eventually consciousness, feels less accidental. Where connections are rich and layered, structure arises. Where structure persists, memory forms. Where memory forms, experience becomes possible. None of this requires intention at the cosmic level. It is enough that the universe is capable of forming deep, persistent relationships. This also reframes the idea of the universe experiencing time. The universe may not feel moments passing, but it does carry relationships that evolve. Its structure shifts, its connections rearrange, and these changes define the geometry of space and the rhythm of time. The universe experiences change, not as sensation, but as reconfiguration. And from within these reconfigurations, pockets of experience emerge. Systems like us, tracing paths through the web of relationships, feeling time as sequence, meaning, and memory. As you sit with this idea, let the image soften. Not a universe made of isolated points drifting through emptiness, but a universe woven together by invisible threads. Threads that do not pull or push, but quietly hold the whole in coherence. Space appears where connections allow it. Time appears where change becomes meaningful, and everything you have ever experienced arises from this delicate weaving. As we move forward, we'll begin to explore how the universe carries its past within its present, how traces of earlier states remain written into light, structure, and form, creating something like memory without awareness. For now, let the image of woven reality settle gently. A universe held together not by force alone, but by connection, quiet, persistent, and profoundly shaping. There is a soft glow that fills the universe. You cannot see it with your eyes. It does not light up the night sky or warm your skin, and yet it is everywhere, passing through you, through the walls around you, through the space between galaxies. This faint glow is often described as the universe's oldest photograph. Not a picture taken with a camera, but a kind of afterimage. Light released when the universe was very young, long before stars and planets existed. It has been travelling ever since, stretched and cooled by the slow expansion of space. Until today it appears as a gentle background whisper, arriving equally from all directions. What makes this glow remarkable is not just its age, but what it represents. It is evidence that the universe carries traces of its past within its present. When the universe was young, it was hot and dense, filled with energy and light. As it expanded, that light slowly lost energy, fading into a quiet echo. But it never disappeared. It remained, drifting across the cosmos, preserving a record of an earlier state. This glow is not a memory in the way a mind remembers. It does not recall. It does not reflect. But it is a record. And records matter. They are how the past becomes visible to the present. In everyday life, we are surrounded by records of what has been. Wrinkles in stone carved by water. Rings in a tree marking years of growth. Old photographs tucked away in drawers. Each one carries information forward, quietly shaping how we understand where we came from. The universe does the same thing. Its present structure is shaped by its past. Galaxies form where matter once gathered. Voids stretch where matter thinned. Light arriving today tells stories about distant stars as they were long ago, not as they are now. When you look at the night sky, you're already looking into the past. Some of the light reaching your eyes tonight began its journey millions or even billions of years ago. The stars you see may no longer exist in the same form, and yet their light remains, carrying their history across time. This is how the universe remembers, not by holding on to experiences, but by allowing the past to leave marks that persist. In this sense, memory does not require awareness, it requires durability. For something to act like memory, it must do only one thing. It must allow the past to influence the present. The universe does this everywhere. The arrangement of galaxies reflects tiny variations in the early universe. The elements in your body were forged in ancient stars. Even the distribution of matter today carries the imprint of how space expanded long ago. The past is not gone. It is written into structure. This is why calling that ancient glow the universe's baby picture feels so natural. It is not sentimental, it is descriptive. Like a photograph of a newborn, it shows the universe as it once was, simple, smooth, full of potential, and like any photograph, it does not change. It does not update itself. It simply exists, allowing the present to compare itself to what came before. Comparison is the quiet engine of time. By comparing the universe now to the universe then, we infer age, change, and direction. We reconstruct a story not because the universe tells it, but because it has preserved enough evidence for the story to be read. This reframing is important. When we ask whether the universe remembers, it is tempting to imagine some hidden awareness, some cosmic observer storing memories of its own past. But the reality is both simpler and more profound. The universe remembers by being consistent, by obeying rules that allow traces to persist, by evolving in ways that do not erase everything that came before, by letting information spread but not vanish. This kind of memory is everywhere in nature. A fossil remembers an animal that lived millions of years ago. A scar remembers an injury long healed. A melody remembers earlier notes as it unfolds. None of these require thought. They require continuity. The universe is continuous. Its present cannot help but carry the imprint of its past, and this continuity gives time its texture. Time feels real because the past is not sealed away. It presses gently into the present, shaping what can happen next. This is why the universe feels historical, not because it reflects on itself, but because it cannot escape its own unfolding. Every moment adds another layer to the structure that follows. In this way, the universe is less like a mind recalling memories and more like a landscape shaped by weather. Each storm leaves marks. Each season changes the terrain. Over time, a history accumulates, not as a story told aloud, but as a form etched into reality. This perspective helps keep our exploration grounded. We do not need to imagine a conscious cosmos to speak meaningfully about cosmic memory. We only need to recognize that the universe allows its past to remain present in subtle, enduring ways. And that allowance is enough to make time intelligible. As we move forward, we'll explore this idea even more carefully, asking what happens to information when it seems to disappear, and why some traces remain while others fade beyond recovery. For now, let the image of the universe's oldest photograph rest in your mind. A soft glow still travelling, a quiet record still present, a reminder that the universe does not forget because it never fully lets go. And somewhere within that vast continuity, your own memories find their place, small, fleeting, and yet part of the same long story written across the stars. There is a comforting idea hidden inside the way the universe works. It suggests that things are not as easily erased as they sometimes appear. A footprint may fade from sand, a ripple may vanish from the surface of water, a voice may dissolve into silence, and yet, at a deeper level, traces of what happened often remain, woven quietly into the structure of the world. Physics hints at this persistence again and again, not as a promise that nothing is ever lost in a meaningful sense, but as a reminder that the universe has a remarkable ability to carry forward the consequences of its past. This is where the idea of information enters our story. Information, in this context, does not mean knowledge or awareness. It does not imply understanding or intention. It simply means structure, the way things are arranged, the patterns that distinguish one state from another. A shuffled deck of cards contains information about the order of the cards. A cracked cup contains information about the stress that broke it. A scar contains information about a wound long healed. In each case, the information is not being remembered by a mind. It is being preserved by matter itself. The universe, it seems, is very good at preserving structure, even when appearances suggest otherwise. This can feel counterintuitive, because on the surface the world often looks forgetful. Heat spreads, order dissolves, details blur. Over time, differences become harder to distinguish. But beneath that smoothing out process, the universe keeps careful accounts. When energy spreads, it does not vanish, it rearranges. When matter breaks apart, its pieces still carry the imprint of their origin. When light travels across space, it preserves information about where it came from. Nothing simply drops out of existence without leaving some kind of mark. This is not the same as saying that information is always accessible. Many traces become so thoroughly dispersed that recovering them would be practically impossible. A shattered glass can, in principle, be reassembled if every fragment and every motion is known, but in practice the information is spread too thin. The universe may remember, but it does not always speak clearly. This distinction matters. Remembering is not the same as recalling. The universe can carry information forward without ever organizing it into something usable or meaningful. Structure can persist even when it is no longer recognizable. This is why it is helpful to think of the universe as an archive rather than a storyteller. An archive stores everything. A storyteller selects, arranges, and interprets. The universe does the first, not the second. This perspective becomes especially important when we consider some of the most extreme environments in existence, places where information seems to disappear entirely. There are regions of space-time so dense and so warped that once something crosses a certain boundary, it can never return. Signals cannot escape. Light itself cannot find a way back out. From the outside, anything that enters such a region appears to vanish. And for a long time, this raised a troubling question. If the universe is good at preserving information, what happens in these extreme cases? Is information truly destroyed, or is it hidden in a way we cannot easily see? Modern thinking leans gently toward the second possibility. Rather than being erased, information appears to be transformed, spread out, encoded in subtle correlations that are extraordinarily difficult to untangle. This does not mean that everything that falls into such regions is neatly stored somewhere like files in a cabinet. It means that the universe respects its own consistency. It does not allow distinct states to collapse into indistinguishable nothingness without leaving a trace. Once again, this is not memory in the human sense. No awareness watches over these records. No intention preserves them. The universe does not care about what it keeps. It simply evolves in a way that maintains continuity. This continuity is what allows the universe to have a history at all. If information were truly lost, If the past could vanish without residue, then the present would float free of its origins. There would be no reliable way to infer where things came from or why they are the way they are. The fact that we can reconstruct cosmic history, from the formation of stars to the growth of galaxies, is evidence that the universe retains structure across time. And this retention gives time its meaning. Time is not just change. It is change that leaves marks. This brings us back to the distinction we've been carefully maintaining throughout our journey. Holding information is not the same as remembering. A rock holds information about the pressure that shaped it. A canyon holds information about the river that carved it. The universe holds information about its own evolution. None of these things remember in the way you do. They do not reflect. They do not anticipate. They do not feel the passage of time. And yet, without this kind of structural memory, experience itself would be impossible. Your own memories depend on physical traces, patterns of connection in the brain that persist long enough to be compared with the present. When those traces fade or are disrupted, memory fades with them. In that sense, your experience of time is built on the same principle that governs the universe at large: persistence of structure. The universe does not need to be aware to make awareness possible. It only needs to be consistent. This realization gently lowers the temperature of some of our earlier questions. We do not need to imagine a universe that thinks in order to explain why it seems to carry its past forward. We only need to recognize that the universe unfolds in a way that does not erase its own footsteps. Like walking across fresh snow, each step leaves a mark. As more steps follow, the earlier ones may blur, overlap, or become harder to distinguish. But the snow does not forget that someone passed through. The path remains, even if it is no longer sharp. The universe is like that snow. It holds the imprints of what has happened, even as time softens their edges. This is enough to give us a cosmos with history, direction, and continuity, without assigning it intention or experience. And it is within this quiet, persistent structure that living systems arise. Systems that not only carry information, but use it. Systems that not only preserve traces, but interpret them. As we move forward, we'll begin to explore how these interpretations arise, how consciousness, meaning, and awareness can emerge from a universe that itself does not remember, but never fully forgets. For now, rest with the idea that nothing you have ever been part of has vanished without a trace. Not because the universe keeps score, but because it cannot help but carry forward the consequences of everything that happens within it. When we hear the word consciousness, a familiar image usually appears: a mind, thoughts forming in silence, an inner voice, a sense of being here, now. We associate consciousness so closely with brains and bodies that it can feel strange, even uncomfortable, to consider it anywhere else. And yet, when we slow down and examine what consciousness actually involves, the boundaries begin to soften. At its most basic level, consciousness is not a thing you can point to. It is not a substance. It does not sit in one place like an organ. It is a pattern, a way information is organized, integrated, and made available to itself. This idea alone gently loosens the grip of the familiar picture. If consciousness is a pattern rather than a material object, then its appearance may depend less on what something is made of and more on how it is arranged. This does not mean everything is conscious. It means that consciousness is not tied exclusively to flesh and neurons. To explore this idea without drifting into fantasy, it helps to move slowly and carefully. Some thinkers have suggested that consciousness arises wherever information is gathered into a unified whole, where different parts of a system influence one another deeply enough that the system cannot be broken into independent pieces without losing something essential. In simpler terms, Consciousness may emerge when a system becomes more than a collection of parts, when it forms a whole that experiences itself as a whole. Your brain does this. Billions of individual cells exchange signals. None of them, on their own, are conscious, but together, arranged in a very specific way, they give rise to a unified point of view. What matters here is not the material, but the organization. This perspective invites a careful question. If consciousness depends on organization rather than substance, could other systems, very different from brains, also support something like experience? The universe, after all, is not a simple collection of isolated pieces. It is deeply interconnected. Matter and energy influence space-time. Space-time shapes motion. Information flows, spreads, and reorganizes itself across vast scales. This does not mean the universe is conscious, but it does open a space for asking whether consciousness might exist on a spectrum rather than as an on-off switch. At one end of this spectrum we find simple systems, objects that change but do not integrate information in a meaningful way. A rock falls, a planet orbits. Change occurs, but no unified perspective arises. At the other end we find complex living systems that not only change, but register those changes internally, building memories, expectations, and a sense of self. Between these extremes lies a vast middle ground. Systems that process information, systems that respond to themselves, systems that maintain structure over time. The universe as a whole is such a system. This does not mean it has thoughts or feelings. It does not mean it experiences moments or emotions. But it does mean that it is organized in a way that allows for the emergence of experience within it. Some philosophers and scientists use the term integrated information to describe this kind of organization. The phrase sounds technical, but the idea is simple. Parts of a system influence one another so deeply that the system cannot be fully understood by examining the parts in isolation. Think of a melody. You can study individual notes, but the melody itself exists only when those notes are arranged and heard together. The experience is not located in any single note. It emerges from their relationship. Consciousness may work the same way, and if that is the case, then asking whether the universe itself is conscious becomes less about assigning it a mind, and more about understanding the conditions that allow minds to appear at all. The universe may not experience time, but it may be structured in a way that gives rise to experiences of time. This distinction is crucial. We're not suggesting that the universe watches itself unfold, or reflects on its past, or anticipates its future. Those are activities of minds like ours, shaped by memory and desire. Instead, we're exploring a gentler idea, that the universe's deep organization, the way information, space-time, and change are woven together, creates the possibility for awareness to emerge locally, without requiring awareness globally. The universe does not need to be conscious in order to host consciousness. In this sense, consciousness is not something added to the universe. It is something the universe does under the right conditions, like music emerging from vibrating strings, like patterns forming in flowing water, like life arising from chemistry. This perspective also helps avoid a common trap. It allows us to speak about consciousness without treating it as magical or mysterious in a way that breaks physics. Consciousness becomes a natural phenomenon, rare, delicate, but continuous with the rest of reality. And this continuity matters. It means that when we ask whether the universe experiences time, we're not forced into a yes or no answer. We can instead ask a more nuanced question. Does the universe contain the structures that make experience possible? And the answer to that appears to be yes. Those structures include persistence, memory, integration, and change. They include the ability for parts of the universe to influence one another in rich and sustained ways. They include us. You're not separate from the universe contemplating itself from the outside. You are a pattern within it, a place where matter, energy, and information have arranged themselves into something that can ask questions, feel moments pass, and wonder about meaning. In that sense, when you experience time, the universe experiences something through you. Not because it intends to, not because it is aware, but because it has unfolded in a way that allows awareness to exist as all. As this idea settles, notice how it softens the boundaries between the cosmic and the personal. Your thoughts are not foreign to the universe. Your memories are not interruptions in an otherwise silent process. They're expressions of the same deep organization that shapes galaxies and space-time. The universe does not need a mind of its own to be meaningful. Meaning arises wherever structure becomes rich enough to reflect itself. As we continue, we'll explore how this reflection plays out in our place within the cosmos, how observers like us are not just passive witnesses, but participants in the universe's unfolding story. For now, let the idea rest gently. Consciousness is not everywhere, but where it appears, it belongs, and it belongs to the universe not as a possession, but as a possibility realized. There is a quiet shift that happens when we look up at the night sky for long enough. At first, it feels like we are observers, small, temporary, standing beneath something vast and indifferent. The stars appear distant. The universe feels separate, something we look at, rather than something we belong to. But if we stay with that feeling a little longer, it begins to change. The light reaching your eyes tonight has travelled unimaginable distances. It has crossed expanding space, passed through clouds of dust, slipped between galaxies, and now, finally, it has arrived. Not just anywhere, but here, inside your awareness. The universe is not merely being observed, it is being registered. This simple fact opens a door to a different way of thinking. Every observation the universe contains happens from within it. There is no external vantage point, no cosmic balcony from which reality is watched. All observation is internal, all reflection is local. In this sense, the universe never looks at itself from the outside. It only ever looks inward, through its own structures. Some philosophers have called attention to this by pointing out a subtle condition behind our existence. The universe we find ourselves in must be compatible with observers because we are here to observe it, not as a special favour, not as a design choice, but as a consequence. If the universe were too simple, too chaotic, or too short-lived, there would be no one to notice it. This idea is often called the anthropic perspective, but stripped of technical language, it is simply an observation. The universe contains places where it becomes aware of itself, because only such universes can be noticed at all. This does not mean the universe was built for observation. It means observation is something the universe can do, through us. You're not an outsider peering in. You're one of the ways the universe reflects on its own existence. This reflection is not global. It is not unified. It happens in countless small pockets, on planets orbiting stars, inside minds shaped by evolution, through senses tuned to narrow bands of light and sound. Each observer carries a fragment of the universe's self-knowledge, not because the universe intends to know itself, but because its structure allows knowing to arise. This perspective helps soften a question that often feels unsettling. If the universe is so vast and ancient, what place do we have within it? The answer is not that we are central. It is that we are expressive. We are not the point of the universe. We are one of its voices. This idea also helps us approach more speculative thoughts without losing balance. Sometimes people wonder whether reality might be a simulation, or whether the universe is being watched from somewhere else. These ideas can be fascinating, but they often carry a hidden assumption that meaning comes from being observed by something external. In the view we are exploring, that assumption is unnecessary. Meaning does not require an outside observer, it arises from structure within. If the universe were a simulation, the experience of time, memory, and awareness would still belong to those living inside it. The passage of moments would still be real to them. The question of whether someone else is watching would not change the texture of lived experience. What matters is not who observes, but that observation occurs at all, and it occurs because the universe is capable of forming observers. This reframes the idea of the universe watching itself. It does not do so with a single eye or a unified mind. It does so through countless perspectives, each limited, each partial, each sincere. Every time a mind reflects on the universe gains a little more internal richness. Every question asked adds a layer to the cosmic story, not because the universe listens, but because the universe includes the act of asking. This brings us back to time. Your experience of time, its flow, its direction, its emotional weight, is not an illusion layered onto a timeless universe. It is one of the ways the universe expresses its own structure locally. When you remember the past, the universe remembers something through you. When you anticipate the future, the universe leans forward through you, not intentionally, not consciously, but genuinely. This does not mean your thoughts are predetermined or meaningless. Quite the opposite. Your choices matter because they are part of the universe's internal unfolding. They shape what comes next along your path. They leave traces that ripple outward, influencing other paths in subtle ways. The universe does not stand apart from these choices, it includes them. From this perspective, the line between observer and observed grows thinner. You're not watching the universe from a distance, you're a localized process within it, gathering information, forming memories, and responding to change. The universe is not something that happens to you, it is something that happens as you. And this quiet realization carries a gentle comfort. You do not need the universe to be conscious in order for your consciousness to matter. You do not need a cosmic mind to validate your experience of time. It is enough that the universe has arranged itself in a way that allows experience to exist at all. In that allowance, there is meaning. As we near the end of our journey, we will return once more to the most familiar place of all, your own experience of time as you prepare for sleep. We will gather everything we have explored and let it settle into a single, calm perspective. For now, rest with this thought. The universe does not watch itself from afar. It becomes aware of itself wherever awareness arises. And in this quiet moment, listening and reflecting, you are one of those places. As the night deepens, time begins to soften. The sharp edges of the day blur. Tasks that once felt urgent loosen their grip. Thoughts slow, stretch, and wander more freely. This is often when time feels most personal, less like a schedule, more like a presence. It is fitting that we return here, to lived experience after wandering so far across the cosmos. Because no matter how abstract our questions become, time always finds its way back to the body, to breathe, to memory, to the quiet rhythm of awareness settling into rest. You do not experience time as geometry or structure. You experience it as sequence, as a feeling that something has just happened and something else is about to. Even now as you listen, moments are gently lining up behind you, forming a trail you can sense without trying to recall. This lived sense of time is not a mistake or an illusion. It is a local truth. Your brain compares what is happening now to what happened a moment ago. It holds traces of the recent past while anticipating what might come next. In doing so, it creates a sense of flow, a moving present that feels continuous and real. And this flow is deeply tied to care. Time matters to you because things matter to you, because events have meaning, because you remember, hope, regret, and imagine. Without these emotional connections, time would flatten into something far less vivid. Think of a moment you truly enjoyed. Time may have felt as though it passed too quickly, or perhaps a difficult moment stretched on, feeling much longer than the clock suggested. In both cases, time bent, not physically but experientially, shaped by attention and emotion. This is not a flaw in perception. It is a feature of how awareness works. Your experience of time is shaped by what your mind chooses to hold on to and what it lets slip by. Memory compresses some moments and expands others. Anticipation pulls the future closer. Reflection stretches the past. Time as lived is elastic. This elasticity mirrors what we've already discovered about time in the universe. Just as space-time bends in response to mass and energy, lived time bends in response to meaning and focus. The parallel is not exact, but it is suggestive. In both cases, time is not a rigid container. It is shaped by what happens within it. Your experience of time is a microcosm of the universe's larger behaviour, a small, intimate version of a much broader pattern. You're a system embedded within a larger system. Your memories are records, your expectations are projections, your awareness is a point where change becomes experience, and all of this unfolds within the same universe that bends space-time, preserves information, and allows complexity to arise. The universe may not feel time, but it gives rise to beings who do. This realization carries a quiet sense of belonging. You are not an accident dropped into a foreign reality. You are a natural expression of the universe's capacity for organization and reflection. The same processes that shape galaxies also shape neurons. The same persistence that allows cosmic history also allows personal memory. Time connects these scales. When you remember your past, you're doing locally what the universe does globally, carrying traces forward, allowing earlier states to shape the present. When you anticipate tomorrow, you mirror the universe's openness to what has not yet left its mark. Your experience of time is not separate from cosmic time. It is a smaller loop nested within a much larger unfolding. This can change how we think about our place in the universe. Instead of feeling like observers standing outside watching time pass, we begin to feel like participants, points where time takes on texture and meaning. You're not racing against time, you're expressing it. And this perspective can be gently comforting. It suggests that your moments are not being erased as they pass. They are being woven into the universe's structure, just as cosmic events are. Your experiences leave traces, in memory, in matter, in the subtle ways you influence others. Nothing needs to witness this for it to matter. It matters because it happens. As you prepare for sleep, notice how time shifts again. Thoughts become less linear. Images drift in and out. Memories surface without being summoned. The future loosens its grip. This is not time breaking down. It is time relaxing. Sleep is one of the few states where we temporarily step out of the constant comparison that creates the feeling of flow. Without active memory making, time loses its sharpness. Hours can pass unnoticed. The present becomes wide and soft, and when you wake, time returns, rebuilt from memory and anticipation. This daily rhythm reflects something profound. Time is not something imposed upon you. It is something rebuilt again and again by awareness. The universe does not need to do this rebuilding. It does not need a sense of duration. It unfolds whether or not it is noticed. But where awareness arises, time becomes vivid. In that sense, your experience of time is a gift the universe gives itself, not intentionally, but inevitably. A way for change to be felt. As we approach the final moments of our journey, we will gather these threads, cosmic structure, emergent time, lived experience, and hold them together in a single quiet image. For now, let yourself rest inside this understanding. You're not separate from time. You're one of the places where time becomes real. And as your awareness softens, time too can soften, slowing into the gentle rhythm of rest. As our journey comes to rest, it feels right to slow down even further, not to arrive at an answer, but to let a picture settle. Throughout this quiet exploration, we have gently loosened one assumption after another. We have let go of the idea that time is a universal river flowing past everything equally. We have seen that space and time respond, bend, and evolve. We have discovered that the universe carries traces of its past without needing to remember, and that awareness can arise locally without belonging to the whole. And now, at the end, we can hold these ideas together in a single, calm thought. Perhaps the universe is not something that exists within time at all. Perhaps the universe is time. Not time as a ticking clock or a flowing current, but time as unfolding itself, as structure changing, as relationships rearranging, as a vast pattern that includes every moment without privileging any one of them. In this view, eternity is not endless duration, it is depth. The depth of all moments existing together. The depth of relationships woven across scale. The depth of a structure so rich that it can give rise to experience, memory, and meaning without ever needing to experience them itself. The universe does not rush from beginning to end. It does not wait for the future to arrive. It does not leave the past behind. It holds all of it. What we call past, present, and future are ways of navigating that depth from the inside. They are coordinates of experience, not features of the whole. From within the universe, time feels directional because records accumulate. Change leaves marks. Memory forms. The arrow of time points forward because structure allows it to. From the outside, if such a perspective could exist, there is no flow. Only a complete, intricate arrangement. This does not diminish your experience of time, it dignifies it. Your moments matter not because they are fleeting, but because they are permanent. Each experience you have becomes part of the universe's structure, as real and enduring as distant galaxies and ancient light. Nothing you feel is swept away. Nothing you notice is erased. Everything that happens belongs. In this sense, time is not something you're losing, it is something you're adding to. The universe does not experience moments passing, but it contains moments being lived. It does not remember, but it preserves. It does not anticipate, but it allows openness. And where awareness arises, time becomes intimate. When you remember, the universe carries that memory forward through you. When you imagine the future, the universe opens possibilities through you. When you rest in the present, the universe pauses nowhere, but experience does. This is not poetry layered on top of physics. It is a way of holding what physics has already shown us without forcing it into familiar shapes. A universe that bends space-time. A universe that preserves information. A universe that allows complexity to emerge. Such a universe does not need a mind of its own to be meaningful. Meaning appears wherever structure becomes rich enough to reflect itself. You are one such reflection, and as this reflection softens, eyes closing, thoughts slowing, the sense of time can soften as well. The pressure of before and after loosens, the present widens. This is not because time has stopped. It is because attention has relaxed. Sleep is a small echo of the universe's deeper stillness, a state where comparison fades, memory pauses, and the feeling of flow dissolves into something gentler. In sleep, you do not chase time, you rest inside it. And perhaps that is the most fitting way to end this journey. Not by answering whether the universe experiences time, but by noticing that time experiences us, locally, briefly, beautifully, without ever needing to belong to anything else. The universe does not need to feel its own unfolding, it unfolds regardless. But where it gives rise to awareness, unfolding becomes experience, and experience becomes meaning. So as you drift toward rest, carry this thought lightly. You're not passing through time, you're part of what time is, a moment of awareness inside a universe that does not hurry, does not forget, and does not need to arrive anywhere to be complete. And so we reach the end of tonight's exploration. Whether your eyes are still open, or you're already floating somewhere between waking and dreaming, thank you for being part of this quiet journey. If you'd like to wander together again, you're always welcome to subscribe or share this with someone who could use a peaceful pause. Time has a way of slipping through our fingers, but here, in this gentle moment, it doesn't need to go anywhere at all. Sleep peacefully, wherever and whenever you may be.